Hi, my name's Andrew. I'm from Advanced School Driving. We're going to go through your air brakes test now. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check my air gauges here to make sure that they're below 90. They're not, so I'm going to have to bring them down myself by pumping the brake. Okay, now both needles are below 90, so I'm going to make sure I'm in neutral. I'm going to perform a safe start now by engaging the clutch and turning the ignition. Now for my cutout test, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give some throttle, bring my RPMs up to 1100, and I'm going to wait till my needles stop moving. That's how I know the compressor is cut out. Okay, my needles have cut out, they've stopped moving. My primary reads at 120 psi, my secondary reads at 115 psi. This is a good test because both needles cut out before reaching 130 psi. My next test is going to be my cut-in test. For this test, I'm going to hit the brakes, let it go, put my finger on the needle, and count to 8. I'm looking to see if the needle rises. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. My needle did not rise, so I'm going to repeat that process. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, the needle has risen off my finger. My primary rose at 90 psi. My secondary rose at 95 psi. This is a good test because my needle's cut in before reaching 85 psi. My next test is going to be my applied pressure test. So I'm going to go ahead and build my air pressure back up to maximum before beginning this test. I'm going to go ahead and give some throttle again up to 1100 RPMs to assist my PSI coming up more quickly. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and engage my clutch, put the truck into low gear. Now I'll turn the engine off. After the engine's off, I'm going to disengage my clutch, and I'll release my brake valves here in the dash. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for my needles to completely stabilize or stop moving here. Okay, now that my air gauges have stopped moving, I'm going to go ahead and put my foot on the brake. Wait for them to stabilize again. Now we'll give readings. My primary is at 100 psi. My secondary is at 95 psi. I'm going to count for 1 minute with my foot on the brake to see if I have any air loss. Okay, for the video's sake, we're going to pretend that a minute has just passed. My primary is still reading at 100 psi. My secondary is still reading at 95 psi. This would be a successful test because we did not lose more than 4 pounds of pressure within that 1 minute. My next test, after doing my cut out, my cut in, and my applied pressure test, is going to be my low air warning test. Now, in order for this test to work, I'm going to have to turn my ignition on to leave my engine off. Now that all the buzzers and lights have kind of relaxed a little bit, I'm going to pump my brakes all the way down until I see a warning light or a buzzer come on. It could be either or. In this truck's case, it's going to be both. I'm going to pump the brakes down to see when that activates. Okay, it's now activated. My primary is reading at 70 psi. My secondary is reading also at 70 psi. This would be a successful test because my warning device came on between 55 and 75 psi. My next test is going to be my spring brake test, or what they call the pop-out test. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the key off so the buzzer goes off there. And I'm going to pump down my brakes until both of these valves pop out. Okay, my valves have popped out. I'm going to go ahead and give my readings now. Primary is sitting at 28 psi, secondary is sitting at 30 psi. This would be a good test because my spring brakes popped out between 20 and 45 psi. My next test is going to be my parking brake test. In order to do this test, I'm going to make sure I take the transmission out of gear, back into neutral, perform a safe start again by holding the clutch in. And again, Again, I'm going to build my air pressure back up to maximum before beginning this test. I'm going to give some throttle, bring my RPMs to about 1100. Maximum air pressure. Now I'm going to perform my parking brake test. First thing I'm going to do is press my clutch all the way to the floor, put myself into low gear, and now I'm checking to see if the truck holds these brakes engaged. So I'm going to test them both together now, releasing the clutch slowly until I feel the slight tug or vibration of the truck. There it is. Both brakes have held together. Now I'm going to release my tractor brake, and I'm now testing my trailer brake. Okay, my trailer brake is held as well. Then I now set my tractor brake and release my trailer brake. Now I'm going to be testing my tractor brake here because it's pulled out. Slight tug. There it is. I'm going to set my trailer brake and put myself back into neutral. I'm now going to tell the examiner that this is a good test because I tested both brakes together and individually. For my last test, I'm going to perform my service brake test. For this test, you're going to ask the examiner, would you like me to perform this test or verbalize it to you? Due to our lack of space that I have right now, I'm going to go ahead and verbalize this test to you. I'm going to go ahead and build the air pressure back up to maximum. I'm going to put myself into gear, and I'm going to release my brakes and roll forward at 5 miles an hour. I'm then going to press my brake, and I'm going to brake to a stop. I'm going to have my hands on the side of the wheel. During the stop, I'm looking for a pull to the left, to the right, any delay of braking, or any noises that I'll be listening for. That concludes our test. Alright, we're going to go over your in-cab inspection now. The first thing that you want to check is that your seatbelt is not frayed. It's in good condition here. You want to make sure the locking mechanism works and unlocks. The next thing I'm going to check is my emergency equipment here. You want to check you got a fire extinguisher that's usually next to the seat here. You want to check to make sure that you have 3 reflective triangles in the truck if you break down. You want to make sure you also have fuses and breakers for all the lights in the truck in case if something were to go wrong, you could fix that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come across my gauges here, check my temperature gauge. I want to make sure that I'm between 170 and 180. I want to check my oil gauge here. I want to make sure that I'm 20 to 60 and that comes on within 4 seconds of starting the truck. I'm now going to check my voltmeter. When the truck started, it's going to be on this digital gauge here. You want to make sure that that's between 12 and 14 volts. We're going to go over to my air pressure gauge here. I want to make sure that they're functional and they're working. We just tested those on our air brakes test. The next thing that I'm going to go to is my blinkers here and my hazards. I want to make sure that my left blinker works, my right blinker works, and also that my hazards, when I pull out this red latch behind here, that those work as well. The next thing I'm going to go to is my horn. My city horn is here. I want to make sure that works properly. My air horn is up here. Make sure that's working good as well. I'm going to come down to my heater and my defroster here. I want to make sure that that's functional and working, and that everything is working very well. The next thing I'm going to go to is my wipers and my washers for my window here, that they move properly, they're working, and that my mirrors are working and adjusted properly to me, and make sure there's no cracks or illegal stickers on my window, and everything is looking good and ready to roll on the road. Okay. We're going to start off from your inspection from this side. I'm going to start from top to bottom. I'm going to check all of my hoses. I want to check for abrasions, bubbles, or cuts. I'm going to check for all of my clamps. Okay, I want to make sure that they're nice and tight. All right. I'm going to come down. I'm going to check my alternator here. I want to make sure all the bolts, they're nice and tight. They're not arcing. I want to make sure the belt has no more than 3/4 of an inch play here. I'm going to come down to my water pump. I want to make sure that it's not leaking. All the bolts are nice and tight and it's in good condition as well. I'm going to come down to my frame now. I'm going to check to make sure it doesn't have any illegal welds, any illegal cuts, or any breaks, or anything like that in it. I'm going to come to my spring mount, making sure that all the bolts are nice and tight, it's in good condition and not broken. I'm now going to jump down to my leaf springs. I only have 2 here, so I'm going to have no damage in the front. I want to make sure that it does not have any breaks in it. If I have 4, I could have 1 damage. I only have 2, so I could have no damage. I could have 1/4 damage. I'm now going to check my U-bolts. I want to make sure that they're in good condition. The bolts in the bottom are nice and tight and everything is working properly. I'm now going to come to my shock absorber here. I want to make sure that the bolts are nice and tight. I don't have any hydraulic leak here and it's in good condition. I'm now going to come to my brake hose here making sure it doesn't have any abrasions, bubbles, or cuts. I'm going to come to my brake chamber, making sure it's not cracked, broken, in good condition, and that my clamp is nice and tight. I'm now going to come to my push rod and slack adjuster. I want to make sure that the push rod doesn't come out more than 1 inch when the brakes are applied. I want to check the slack adjuster and push rod and make sure that it's no more than 90 degrees when the brakes are released and no less than 90 degrees when the brakes are applied. I'm now going to come to my inside lining and drum. I want to make sure there's no bluing or glazing and that there's at least a 1/4 inch on the pad. Okay, now I'm going to jump back to my tire assembly here. I'm checking my ICD. That stands for my inflation, my condition, and my depth. I'm going to check my inflation with a commercial tire gauge inside the valve stem here. I'm going to check for the proper PSI by checking on the side of the tire, finding out what that is. I'm now checking my condition. I'm checking all the front of the tire here, the very top, making sure there's no uneven wear going across. There's no bolts or chunks of rubber missing or anything like that, and it's in good, proper order. I'm now checking my depth. I want to make sure that I have at least 4/32 of an inch on the front tires, and also making sure that I don't have any recaps or retreads, that they are steering tires only on the front of the truck. Okay, I'm going to come to my rim, making sure that there's no cracks or illegal welds. I'm coming to my lug nuts, making sure they're nice and tight and my studs are in good condition. I want to make sure there's no rust that could indicate that it's possibly loose. Okay, I'm coming down to my spider bolts here, coming around the hub that hold it on, making sure that it's not loose, there's no rust again, and they're in good condition. I'm checking my hub here inside this cap. I can pop the cap out, insert my pinky on the inside, pull it out. If it's got less than the first indent of my finger here, I would add 90 weight gear oil, and I could add that right where I pulled out the cap. We're now going to head over to the other side. I'm going to start out with all the things that are different over here. You can check the coolant up here. This one you can see through it, so you can check by seeing it. If you can't see, you're going to have to pop the cap off. Just make sure you do that when the engine's cold. Okay, we're going to check back here. We've got our air compressor. You want to make sure that that's functional, working, not broken. We have our power steering pump, making sure that's also functional, not broken, and it's working. It's not leaking any power steering fluid. Right here is our power steering reservoir. You want to make sure, again, you can see through there to see what the level's at. You want to make sure it's in good condition as well and not leaking or anything like that. Back behind the air compressor, we have the fuel pump, making sure it's not cracked, broken, and it's also in good order. Okay? Coming to our oil here, we can pull out the dipstick here, wipe it off with a towel, put it back in and pull it out. You can check the level that way. If you need to add any oil, you can do so right here. Now we're going to jump to our steering system here. This is going to be our steering linkage, making sure it's not cracked, broken, in good condition. You want to check your joint, making sure it's lubed properly and it's working and not cracked and broken. This is going to be our power steering box, again, making sure that it's not cracked, broken, it's functional. Our pitman arm is connected right here, making sure, again, it's not cracked or broken. Right here is our castle nut and carter pin. You want to make sure it's in good condition, it's nice and tight, and it's not missing. Our drag link is down here, making sure it's not cracked, broken, in good condition. Here's our upper and lower steering knuckles. Again, they have castle nut and carter pins on them. Make sure they're in place and it's not cracked or broken and working, okay? Across in the bottom, you can see our tie rod, making sure that's in good condition and not cracked or broken. Kind of gets tricky here. It really depends on your examiner. I could go over the brake assembly, the tire assembly, and the suspension assembly again. It takes quite a bit of time. So I'm going to ask the examiner, would you like me to name the tire assembly, the brake assembly, suspension again, or would you like me to let you know that I know it's identical to what I just explained on the other side? 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell you just to say it's the same. But if they don't, be prepared to name it all, and that just covers all your bases so they don't mark off a lot of points and you really didn't miss anything, because that could happen. So just make sure you cover your bases on that, okay? Coming on back, we're going to check our mirror, making sure it's nice and tight. It's working properly. All the brackets are good. The door open and closes properly. It's not hanging up on the hinges. Our fuel is inside here. You don't need to pop it open. Just make sure you know that it's in here. You want to check the cap on the inside. This is all verbal. You want to check the chain on the inside of the cap, making sure it's got a T-bar connected to it. It's not leaking any fuel. You've got rubber straps in the fuel tank, which are not visible here, but they're there. And if you were checking the condition of the fuel tank, you'd make sure those straps were in good condition. Okay, the crossover lines, you want to check those as well to make sure they're not leaking any fuel, because it could possibly leak from there if you do have a problem. It's something that you need to know and needs to be checked if a problem is arising. Again, we're going to check our indicator light here, making sure that's in good condition, not cracked or broken. It is amber to the side of the vehicle, and everything is working properly on it. It's not burnt out. Here is going to be our battery box. Inside you're going to have a few batteries. You want to make sure the connections are good on them, they're functional, and the water level's okay on them as well. Okay? Coming up to our smokestack, you can see there, that's our exhaust. You want to make sure it doesn't have any excessive soot. If it has excessive soot, that means we could have an exhaust leak that could be a problem. Okay? Coming down to our catwalk going across here, making sure that it's, you know, nice firm, it's not going to move when we jump on it, doesn't have any oil, anything slick where we could fall and injure ourselves. Underneath the catwalk here, we have a drive shaft. You want to make sure it's not cracked, broken, and it needs to be in good condition. Jumping back to our air lines and our electrical line's on the top here. You want to make sure it's not frayed, it's in good condition, it's working properly, and it's connected all the way to the trailer. These are going to be our glad handles, or air lines. You want to make sure that the rubber sealing the inside's not rotted away or missing, and that they are connected. You want to check the lines to make sure they don't have any abrasions, bubbles, or cuts. All right. Coming back here, we also want to check the nose of the trailer as we're coming back, making sure the rivets are in place. It's not ripped or torn. It's in good condition. Coming down under here to our fifth wheel system, we're going to check our apron up here on the top. We want to make sure the apron's in good condition. There's no gap between the apron and the actual fifth wheel. You don't want any gap in between there. You want it to be nice and flush. You want to make sure that the locking jaws there are wrapped firmly around the kingpin, which you can tell that they are wrapped firmly around them. You want to check that release handle here, making sure that it's in the lock stowed away position, push it all the way in to make sure everything's locked. You want to check our platform here, this little triangular, kind of rectangular piece right here, making sure it's not cracked, broken, and it's also in good condition. A lot of trucks here will have what's called a fifth wheel slide, where you'll see tracks coming along here. You want to make sure that it's in the lock position. Now this truck doesn't have it, so if I was being tested, it would not need to be mentioned, but if your truck does have it, it does need to be mentioned. We're going to check all the bolts on the bottom, make sure they're nice and tight. Okay. Now we're going to come down to the suspension back here at the second and third axle. I'm going to start with my airbags, because these are different from the front. We don't have these in the front. You want to check the airbags, make sure the bolts are nice and tight. The bolts aren't broken. It's connected firmly, and the airbag isn't ripped or torn in any way, and it's going to be functional. Now back here, these are called torque springs here. You want to make sure they're not cracked, broken, in good condition, and that the springs in the bottom are also not cracked, broken, and in good condition. Okay? Coming out to my brake assembly, I'm going to tell the examiner that I realize that they're the same as the front, with the only difference of the push rod can now come out 2 inches instead of 1 inch. And I do know that there's a brake system at this axle here, and the same on the other side, so there's 4 brake systems back here on these axles. Okay, make sure that you do mention that you know the other side is the same with the suspension as well. Coming to my tire assembly, I want to make sure that they're checked the same as the front, with the things that are the same, except for the things that are different. One of the things that's different is we can have recaps and retreads back here, where at the front we can only have virgin tires, okay? Steering tires. All right, the depth is 2/32 of an inch rather than 4/32 of an inch. You want to check the gap in between the tires to make sure there's no debris. All right, no rocks or anything that can fling onto your cars or anything like that. Another thing that I'm going to check here is my seals. Now I don't have hub seals where I can pop out and stick my pinky in there and check. They're sealed, but I can make sure that they're not leaking all over the rim, okay? That's what I'm looking for. All right, let's move on back. Okay. Jumping down here, we have our mud flaps, or our splash guards, you can call them whatever you like. You want to make sure they're no lower than 2 inches from the ground and no higher than 8 inches off the ground, okay? They have to be within those parameters. You want to check our brake lights back here, and you also want to check our reverse light there. Make sure they're not cracked, broken, or in good condition. We have a mud flap on the other side there, and that's checked the same as the one on this side. Okay. Our landing gear here, you want to make sure that the landing gear arm's in the locked stowaway position. All right, it cranks up and down nice and easy, and that the sand shoes don't have any debris or anything on them, and they're also not cracked or broken and in good condition. We're going to check the entire side of the trailer now, making sure it's not ripped, torn, the rivets are in place, it's in good condition, and just looking for anything that'd be out of normal. Checking our indicator lights here on the side again, making sure the ramp is side. Checking our brake lines that are hanging down here. Okay, you don't want them to be hanging any lower than 18 inches off the ground, because if they are, they could grab onto something and they could get ripped, torn, and cause damage. Coming back here to our tandem system, you want to make sure it's locked all the way through the hole there, so it's not sliding on the tracks. All right, you want to make sure everything is looking proper on that. Coming on back, you want to check your mount here. Now this mount is different than up at the front. I'm going to make sure I tell the examiner that I know it's welded to the frame, not bolted. The weld's not compromised, okay? On the bottom of the mount here, we're going to have torque rods, making sure they're not cracked, broken, in good condition. Everything's working properly. You can't see it, but you're going to have leaf springs on the top there. Again, making sure they're not cracked, broken, and in good condition. In the middle here, this is called the equalizer. Again, it's welded to the frame, not bolted, making sure the weld's not compromised. You want to check the torque rod again on the bottom and check the leaf springs on the top the same way we just previously did. Checking the brake assembly back here, I'm going to let the examiner know that I know they're identical to the second and third axle. Okay? Not the front, they're identical to the second and third axle. Alright? I'm going to tell them that I'm going to check the tire assembly identical to the second, third axle, but there's one difference on that. I can check the hub seal here. So I'm going to check those the same as I did on the front. Okay? Checking our mud flaps here, the same as we did behind the second and third axle. And now we'll wrap around to the back of the trailer. On the back of the trailer, we're going to check the doors. Make sure they swing open and close properly. They don't swing, they don't hang, or when they do swing, they don't hang up as they're swinging. You want to come up and check the lights at the top, lights at the bottom. You've got indicator lights back here, brake lights, running lights. You want to make sure they're working properly. You also want to check your license plate light up there, make sure it's not cracked, broken. Also, you want that to be in good condition as well. This here is going to be called our DOT bumper. You want to make sure that it's welded firmly to the frame, it's not cracked, bent, or broken, and it's in good condition as well. Okay, I've gotten basically everything, but just to cover myself again, I'm going to say on this side that I'm going to check it identical as I did to the other side. Just for some reason, if I forgot to say check the brake assembly on that side, or so on and so forth. And that concludes our outside pre-trip.
All right.